My circle of friends would argue after every episode of Deadliest Warrior, and no two episodes were as contentious as Pirate vs. Knight and Samurai vs. Viking. Now, Ubisoft has provided a game to answer the question and provide enough salt mining for hours upon hours. What's going on, guys? This is K-Knight23, the video game professor, and we're talking about For Honor. For Honor is an intense medieval fighting game that pits warriors of Viking, Samurai, and Knight factions against each other across various multiplayer modes. Although the game has a single-player campaign, it's more of an extended tutorial designed to let you test out a few of the characters across the factions rather than provide any kind of gripping narrative. Our nightly picks look at aesthetic, challenge, community, and fun, so let's start with aesthetic. The game is beautiful. If you have the rig for it, crank up the graphics and try not to be so mesmerized that you forget you're supposed to be fighting. Each faction has a distinct look and feel to it. The Vikings eschew metal armor in favor of their historically accurate leather and hide, bounding around like gargantuan behemoths, grunting, huffing, and spitting insults in their Nordic tongue. The Knights seem to step out of my childhood fantasies. Their heavy plate and chain rattles as they move in and out of combat, brandishing longswords, halberds, and flails to realize God's will against the enemy. If you think the Ren Fair or a trip to medieval times would be a great first date, you'll love the Knights. Finally, there are the Samurai. Ubisoft nailed their representation again. Although noticeably smaller than their European adversaries, these warriors maintain a nobility that realizes the cliché warrior-poet archetype. Their armor blends form and function with exquisite attention to detail, and their animations are smooth and deadly, demonstrating surgical precision versus the raw and brute power of the Knights and Vikings. For Honor looks and sounds exactly as it should. Whether it's the environmental cranking of a war machine or the close-up and cinematic executions, the game delivers. Challenge. For Honor introduces a system that appears intuitive, but does take some getting used to. Mastering the controls might take players a few sessions, but once you have it down, you really feel like you're controlling every moment of the fight. The challenge in this game comes from recognizing a rock, paper, scissors design direction. Each warrior will have others that they are strong and weak against, by value of the moveset they're given as well as their archetype. Assassins generally have a tough time against heavies, but can cut up a vanguard pretty well. Whereas hybrids, as their name implies, often are adaptable enough to have a fair shake against the others. This analysis is only to be taken broadly. A closer look and you'll see that there are certain warriors within the ranks that slightly defy the system and shake up the metagame. The Peacekeeper is an aggressive assassin, while the Orochi tends to play a more methodical, baiting and countering the enemy type game. Despite slight advantages and disadvantages from the get-go, nothing is set in stone. People are complaining heavily about the strength of the Centurion and the Shinobi right now, with many of their attack combinations being broken and constantly spammed, but just as easily as some of these attacks are to encounter, they're easy to recognize and play against. The Centurion's heavy attack into charged jab can lead to a brutal combo, which leaves the enemy on their back with a gladius probing their chest cavity. But if you have the awareness to get off the Centurion's center line and dodge left or right, you create an easy opportunity to punish them. This is the meat and potatoes of For Honor. Every class has a very powerful combo or ability that will just decimate the enemy if they fail to adapt to it. You need to know and anticipate the Conqueror's shield charge. You must know that the Orochi is going to chip at you with their top light attacks, feint their heavy, and bait you for a guard break. There's 14 warriors. Knowing their strengths and weaknesses isn't a lot to expect after a few hours of playtime. In fact, it's almost demanded, because once you know what they're capable of, that's when the real game begins. Mind games, feints, parries, baiting, all the tenets and tactics of warfare are applicable here, and you could spend hours mastering them only to find yourself whiffing an attack and getting shoved off a ledge. There's a lot of room to grow in For Honor, and casual players like ourselves will find a lot of reward in focusing and bettering our game. Progression. You see the time invested in the game. Each match rewards points to level and prestige your character, as well as currency to buy and upgrade armor and weapons. Additionally, this currency can be used to purchase various cosmetics, ranging from unique executions to costumes to emotes and more. The longer you play, the more your character will start to feel unique and customized to your individual taste. Every 21 levels, you're awarded a prestige rank, which affects the rarity of gear you get from loot crates that you can also purchase with currency or real money. The milestones are reputation rank 1, 3, and 5. At each of these prestige ranks, you'll be awarded higher ranks of gear coming from the chests, starting at common, then changing to rare, then heroic, and finally epic. Now, I mentioned before that you can pay for these chests with real money. Don't get confused. This isn't pay to win. I'm going to tell you why. There's nothing you're buying with real money that you can't get with the game. Like just putting time into the game is going to award you everything that you're going to need. This is pay for convenience, not pay to win. Even the XP and currency boosts can be earned super easy. Really, I see no reason to spend cash in this at all unless you absolutely must have some cosmetic piece and you can't wait a week or two to get it. Another reason not to worry about the microtransactions here is that the gear that will raise and lower certain attributes of your character only has an effect in certain modes of play. I can level up, earn reputation and loads of currency without ever facing a player who has a gear advantage over me. Or I can thrust myself into a match in which gear and character builds can play a more significant role. The choice is ultimately mine and the other players as well. At the end of the day, you'll log in, you'll do a few daily achievements for rewards and reputation and currency, and feel generally pretty good about your playtime. You'll have gone up a few levels, gotten some loot, and seen your war chest grow. In addition to this personal progression, there is, of course, faction progression. The war between the three factions lasts several weeks, and each day there's a screen where weapons impale the map, and I really couldn't care much for this. In fact, I'm pissed that it exists, because watching the map updates delays me from actually getting into the game. It's the first thing that happens once you load in and start. Unfortunately, there's no way to really get any sense of progression with the faction. There's no attrition, there's no tug of war or positioning on the map. It just feels like a thing that happens, and you're forced to watch it happen and do whatever the hell it does. Some weeks I feel like a clueless adolescent being praised for something I had no clue that I did, intentionally or otherwise, when the screen loads up and congratulates me and gives me a load of currency saying that, hey, your faction did really well, good job. And, great, I have no idea how I did that. I mean, really. I was the Viking faction, and it seemed that my faction won the first season. I'm glad I could help, but I don't know what's going on. Now apparently we're losing. I don't know if everyone just changed teams or what. I'll log in the morning, and my faction will be ahead. I'll log in the evening, and we're down by 20 points. I don't know what the hell's going on with this system, but apparently it's a thing, so whatever. Fun factor. The game's fun. It's that simple. If you like medieval combat, if you like multiplayer games, small group competition, if you like fighting games, you really need to check out For Honor. Watch some videos, watch some streams, preferably mine. And if you're not sure, I'd still even say give it a go. But be warned that it will take some getting used to, and it will be frustrating at first. That, perhaps, is my biggest criticism of the game. When you mess up, it's difficult to tell how you messed up. There's not a lot of feedback in the game that communicates what you were doing wrong. You'll mess up and you'll get your head chopped off. But that doesn't really tell me where I kind of dropped the ball. Things have gotten better, but when the game first launched, and this is what I mean. When the game first launched, there was a little tip menu that explained how the systems within the game worked. That's what we're reduced to. We're reduced to tutorials and tip menus. Back in my day, our games came with instruction manuals. No more. So this tip menu explained, and the tutorial as well, keep in mind, explained how countering a guard break worked. All right? It said, hey, this is when you see your opponent do this is when you tap this button and you'll counter it. Sure. So I get in the game, and I try and I fail and fail and fail and fail, and I'm just freaking out. I go online and I read why do I suck at guard breaking so much? And I find out that the tip is wrong. That's not how it works. I just spent all this time trying to do something that just mechanically was improper. So that's a waste. That shit can't happen. You can't let that stuff slip by. Now they fixed it, but it still leaves such a sour taste in my mouth that every time I miss a guard counter or I fail to parry, part of me wonders whether it's my fault or it's the game. And 9 times out of 10, it's probably mine. 10 times out of 10, it's probably my fault. But all the same, that's a thing that you can't happen. Regardless, once you get a handle on all of this, the game does become a hell of a lot of fun. With a few prestige ranks under my belt across a few different characters, I can generally understand what I'm doing right and what I'm doing that's wrong. And when I mess up and I'm subjected to like a 5-second animation of my character being bifurcated, I can take that time to reflect and recognize how to change my tactics and adapt to not just the enemy character, but the player. You see, when For Honor is good, it's great. I'm talking like Leonidas battling at the gates of Thermopylae, Aragorn wading through a throng of Uruk-hai. For Honor clearly communicates to you that you are a powerful warrior capable of changing the flow of battle. And they're right. After a pitched back and forth struggle, my team finally earns an advantage and begins to break the enemy. And this evolved into a sweeping melee in the center of a map. And just as my final character perk refreshed, they're all gathered up together in one giant lovely clump, and boom. A well-placed catapult volley wiped out 3 of the 4 warriors on the enemy side and allowed us to clinch that final kill and provide that victory. It's awesome. But when it's bad, the game is really bad. For Honor is a game of extremes like that. The time between matches can sometimes be longer than the actual matches themselves. If you're doing a one-on-one duel, the time that it might take to actually find an opponent, load a map, select your character, ready up, wait for your opponent to ready up, to be brought to the final load screen, can take upwards to 3 or 4 minutes. Once you get in the match, you feel like you're punished for playing well. I might end a duel in like 2 minutes. If I kill my opponent too quickly, it's like I actually played for half the time I spent loading. Or you win the first 2 rounds and your opponent freaks out and just disconnects. Good game. Back to the loading screen. How frustrating is that? The game requires patience. Not button mashing when the enemy barrels down towards you, but thinking about avenues of attack and countering. Not freaking out, you get those loading screens, but taking that time to kind of decompress because you're going to need it. The game is intense and stressful. You can't freak out over every loss, but you got to consider what you did wrong and you need to adapt. Take the time to learn the class you play and play against. There are definite shortcomings with For Honor, but they are like exterior to the game itself. It's nothing that's hard-coded. It's nothing that is genetic to the gameplay. It's things like making sure you tell your player how the game works on those tip menus. It's improving server matchmaking, giving players 20 seconds to find a character and not 60. Little things like that would make this game way more streamlined and feel much more accessible over the long term. But I'm not too worried about the longevity of For Honor. And its genre of fighter, there isn't much out there to threaten it. So, for now, Ubisoft doesn't have to worry about too much competition. But growing lax and sacrificing vigilance for comfort brought down a lot of great kingdoms in the past, and it could do the same thing to For Honor. But until then, even though For Honor is the only warrior in the arena, they are putting on one hell of a show. Thanks for listening, guys. Make sure you like this, subscribe, share with your friends, and give me some feedback. Are you going to check out For Honor? Is this a kind of game you might be able to get into as a casual player, or are you more like hardcore, really want that competitive multiplayer experience? Let me know, send something, to me in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys later. This is K-Knight23, the Video Game Professor, signing out.